Hi, my name is John, and today I'll be breaking down the writing test in the 2022 selective exam on the 31st of March this year. I did the same type of video with the 2021 exam last year, as well as the selective sample paper the year before. They both received really great feedback, with many students finding it extremely valuable. I will not be going over a sample response for this type of question, as that will just take too long, but rather I will help students understand the question and show students who didn't do the test what the question is actually trying to ask. Let's get into it. For context, this is not the exact writing question that was actually done in the exam, but it's just a recreation of it based on our student feedback, as well as my experience in understanding the way questions are typically structured in these new selective exams. No one will be able to know the exact question and the format of the question unless they had a copy of the actual exam themselves, or if the Department of Education releases it. Although whether or not this happens or whether or not they do release it, this will still serve as really good practice for students that are planning to do the exam. The objective of this video is twofold. Number one, it's for students who just did the exam in March 2022 this year and are curious to see whether what they wrote aligned with what the question was trying to ask. And number two, it's to allow students who have not yet done the exam but are doing the New South Wales selective exam in future years, whether it be next year or the years beyond that, to learn and use this as a bit of a practice point. For the students that we teach at Biggs Academy, we are already in the midst of adapting our resources based on these new changes that were done, not just in writing but in other exams. There were many new interesting twists that have been introduced that was quite surprising compared to the year before, which I will share over time through these videos, but just give me a bit of time. I'll definitely get to that when I get the chance. Regardless, let's get into the actual question. Let's start with the title, Into the Future. This gives us a bit of contextual information on what will occur later on. It may be also a good idea to incorporate this line into the writing response, as we know the setting has to be in the future and has to be futuristic in a sense. In the first sentence, this gives us the text type that they are asking for. We know that it is a diary entry, so we must follow the conventions of a diary entry. It is quite similar to a letter, but instead of writing it to someone else, you're writing it to a diary, most likely for yourself to look at in the future. The voice that should be used in terms of the writing is specified, where you must write from the perspective of a boy or girl your age in the future. This would mean that it will have to be written from the lens of someone who's around 11 years old, as Year 6 students in Australia are that age. Remember, students doing the New South Wales selective exam are in Year 6. This is significant as we know that the diary entry cannot include items or events that are not appropriate for this age group. Items like a baby pacifier would be more suitable for a toddler, while a walking stick would be more suitable for the elderly or pensioners. The gender of either a boy or girl is important as well, because we know that we cannot write from the perspective of a creature or an alien, etc. So it has to be grounded in reality from the perspective of a boy or girl who's around 11 years old, since the parameters of what they've said is that we have to follow that accordingly. In the next line, it provides an exact date, being the 19th of July 2099. This is the date where we know it is nearly 80 years later than 2022. This is important because this is a time period in which the diary entry needs to be set in. Students can either write that the diary entry was written on the 19th of July 2099, or that the events that are recorded in the diary entry occurred on that date. This is a significant detail and actually quite sneaky by the examiners, as many students who are writing this diary entry write it in the past tense, and therefore they cannot say that the events happened that day. If the events that are written down occurred on the 19th of July 2099, that means the date you should write for when the diary entry was written in needs to be a later date, perhaps the 20th or the 21st of July 2099 instead. You can still technically do if the events and the date it was written in is the exact same day, but students just have to make this distinction very clear. For example, maybe they'll write I am going to sleep now, but the event that occurred today was fantastic. This shows again that the selective writing exam would not provide you with unnecessary pieces of information. Every detail has meaning and value. They did something similar last year with the chaos on the beach newspaper report, and now they're doing something a little bit sneaky again. But I hope you guys didn't get tricked by it, or if you see something similar in the future years, that you're aware of it. This sentence specifically instructs students to begin with the words, "Dear diary, I woke up to my house robot loudly singing, then I remembered." This should be a signal for students to know that they have to write in a chronological format, as they are telling you that you are just waking up. We know the reason why you woke up as well, which is the house robot singing. And this is interesting as well, as we know that it is set in the distant future where a house robot is most likely the norm, leading students to think about and wonder what other technological innovations will exist in this fictional world. Students will have to address why the house robot is singing in the first place. Perhaps it is a new alarm system to wake people up instead of using a phone. The possibilities are endless. It also graciously tells students to start with "Dear Diary," which is a helpful reminder for students who do not know the format of a diary entry, or perhaps forgot it, so this can be a fantastic reminder. Although they will not tell you every element that is required in a diary entry format. This affirms the text type of what is required, which is a diary entry. They are requesting students to explore what life is like, which will include a few different facets and factors of the natural daily life. The time setting is repeated, which is in the distant future, which shows just how important this factor is, and it will influence the events and objects that will be discussed. And last of all, when they provide dot points in topics and ideas that may or could be discussed, it is another disguise or trick where they mean it actually must be incorporated into the writing task. Students can include more points beyond the ones that are provided, but they must tick off the ones that are suggested. The first dot point being new and innovative technology. This means that students can make up futuristic technology beyond the singing house robot. They generally will have to not exist in 2022 because this is decades in the future, in 2099. Perhaps instead of a video call, it could be a hologram. The opportunities are truly endless, and students can really use there and share their creativity. The second dot point being home and social life requires students to talk about how people interact at home and with other people. Are there any differences or similarities to these different ways that they communicate? Remember that the context of the diary entry is of a boy or a girl living in 2099. This means that the child will most likely not be too surprised about some of these new technologies that you'll be discussing, and instead it will just be their norm or their daily life. Unless it is the narrator's first time seeing this before, they generally won't be too shocked or surprised. The good thing is that the scene starts with the house robot singing, which means that they start in a home environment, which kind of ticks off a little bit of that home life. The third dot point, which is transportation methods, suggests that students need to talk about futuristic transportation methods such as flying cars or teleportation devices. Perhaps the students wake up from the house robot and travels elsewhere to meet their friends, which is part of the social life, and uses a bunch of new technology, which ticks off the new and innovative technology, which is the first dot point. To reaffirm, this is not the exact writing task that was provided in the actual exam. This is just a recreation from our most high-performing students, as well as my experience about how these tests are typically worded and structured. It will, however, serve as really great practice for students that are planning to do this exam in the future, or for students that are curious about how they fared or understood the question last month. No matter who you are or which situation it is, I hope you guys found this video to be really useful, and that you guys give this video a like, as I really appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed, definitely subscribe. I go through and share advice just like this for the OC selective exam, HAS test, or anything really between primary school and junior high school. If you have any other recommendations or things that you would love for me to cover next, feel free to write this down in the comments below, and I basically reply to everything. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you guys in the next video.